Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the glorious mess of building your own business with the people doing it. I'm your host and fellow business builder, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into some good, honest, small business chat. Hello, business builder, and welcome to what is a very special episode today. It is special because my guest was one of the very first listeners to this podcast, all the way back in December 2021. She reached out to me shortly after it was launched to say how much she was enjoying it and how it was helping her in the creation of her own small business. And she was actually the first listener who did get in touch with me. And this meant so very much to me at the time because podcasting in particular is one of those strange mediums where you're giving a lot out, but you're never quite sure if it's landing as there's no real-time feedback. I mean, aside from reviews, of course, which you know I love. And I really needed that encouragement that it was landing for people as, like, you could probably understand, imposter syndrome is always right around the corner and most certainly was very present for me at the time. So it feels very full circle to be able to invite Lesley Magill, owner of Little Shove Mentoring and Moving, onto the show for a chat today about her experience in growing her small business. And geez, do we get into some absolute juice of it. You will hear about meeting the you that you are away from a corporate role identity, assuming that your business might become one thing and the surprising outcome when you let go. How it feels to realize you're no longer representing a brand or an entity outside of you, that you're actually representing yourself, getting comfortable with pricing yourself and raising those prices as needed, getting through the early business creation speed bumps, and saying yes to the opportunities you don't feel quite ready for yet. Lesley is an absolute gem in human form, so it's no surprise that her clients love her as much as I do and as much as you will too after this episode. We are here for small business growth, encouragement, and real talk to help you through it all. So let's get right into the chat. I'm here with Lesley Magill, owner of Little Shove Mentoring and Moving. With a focus on movement, motivation, and mindset, Little Shove is a mentoring business offering one-on-one sessions and workshops for individuals and teams. Lesley's mentoring clients, they may be facing a career change, feeling lost or stuck in work, life, or self, and need some supported me time with someone who really gets it. And Lesley uses her wide range of professional and personal life experiences to help others find direction and purpose. At the heart of every Little Shove mentoring session and workshop is helping you rediscover who you are, what you want, and why you do what you do. In Lesley's own words, the definition of mentoring is using your personal and professional life experience to help others. And that's precisely what I'm here to do. Sometimes we know something's wrong, but we don't know where to start. And sometimes we just need a little shove. Some of the corporate clients that have had said little shove include SA Tourism Commission, the University of Adelaide Oval, Journey Beyond, ProBuild Australia, Tourism Industry Council of SA, plus many wonderful individuals. She's building something pretty special here. Lesley, welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Thank you so much. And can I just engage you to always be there whenever someone says to me, what's your business about? Because you just did that in such a great way. I always find myself struggling to articulate it. So thank you. That was a really wonderful intro.
Oh, you're so very welcome. And honestly, I think every single one of us struggles to talk about ourselves and our businesses in that way. I was just not too long ago, before we were jumping on this call, I had a bit of a content spark come through, something I want to write about at some stage when I eventually get my blog live. Is I read a lot of bios about people, and often I read what people have done before, and then they get to telling me about their business. And it's, here's all the justification as to why I have this business. And, a little bit less gets done on this is what the business is and this is who it's helping and this is why I'm doing it. And, I think it's a practice that all of us have. We just go through a process with it. It just takes time. I know I still struggle to describe this podcast to people, and I think about it and talk about it every time. So it's a problem not restricted to any one individual. I hear you, and you are very welcome to take that and use that as your elevator pitch. But before we get right into all of that amazing story behind your business, the show. You're a wonderful listener, of which I am so very grateful for. This first question. How would your best friend describe you?
Yes, well, as you said, I did know that question was coming. And so I was really torn because I thought, do I just ad lib and try and figure it out for myself? And then I thought, no, stuff it. I'll actually be proactive and I'll ask her. So I asked her on the spot today, and I was pretty astounded with the words that she came back with. So these are from my beautiful friend, Paula. She described me as vibrant, authentic, confident, deep, smart. And the last one makes me cringe and laugh at the same time. Sexy. She's gorgeous.
Paula, what an absolute list. That is outstanding. I hope that you'll keep that somewhere you can see it.
I've actually written it out. I'm like, I need to stick that on a wall and remind myself, if that's what she thinks I am and that's what I'm giving off, then I need to be living and breathing that. No, it's very nice. Very nice.
Amen. If you're listening to this, feel free to press pause and just text your best mate. Just ask them what they'd say if you need a little pump up. But before Little Shove, who were you, Lesley?
My goodness. That is such a good question. In terms of career and education, etc., I actually started out doing a science degree. So I didn't know what I wanted to do when I came out of school. I had a whole bunch of ideas, but I really couldn't land it by the time I finished year 12. And I vividly remember my dad saying to me, they need women in science. So this was back in the mid-90s. And that was enough for me to go, okay, Dad says I need women in science. I like science. So I ended up going and doing a science degree. I majored in biology. I was the first person in my family to go to university, and we naively thought that you did a degree and you came out the other side as a scientist. I came out the other side of it as someone who went, holy shit, I have no interest in being a lab rat. I am not interested in pursuing this in a career. So yet again, I was going, what am I going to do with my life? At the time, I was working part-time at the Australian Institute of Sport and at the Adelaide Superdome in cycling. My family's sport has always been cycling. It's how my parents met. And I had been working part-time there, and I was tapped on the shoulder and asked what I was doing next year and would I like to come across and do a year's work helping set up an office in something that I wasn't really told too much detail about, but I knew it was to do with cycling. I said yes, because I didn't want to do what everybody else was doing and go and do a gap year in London. So I started this job, and it ended up being the creation, the very beginning of the Tour Down Under, which you may have heard of. So at the time, it was such a bold move by the government to back an international cycling event in Australia, when at that time cycling was just totally an unknown profession. In Australia, it was an unknown sport, really. So to see where it's now grown to in the 25 years since then is phenomenal. So I was on board for the first 7 years of creating Tour Down Under and helping to create it to what it is now, which is still so very proud and very connected to the event still. That was also the beginning of what went on to become the very successful Clipsal 500. Back then it was the sensational Adelaide 500, the V8 car race. So effectively I was working for Australian Major Events as part of SA Tourism Commission, and I was chucked in the deep end and had to figure out the whole world of major events. So I did that for 7 years. Then I decided to do the thinkable, unthinkable. There was a movie out at the time called Under the Tuscan Sun, which has a bit to answer for, but basically I fell in love with an Italian. I moved to Italy. I lived there for a year. I did what I swore I would never do. I ended up teaching English and came back to get my visa renewed. Ended up picking up a 3-month job with a friend of mine, which turned into A, me deciding not to go back to Italy, and B, that turned into a 6-year career in project and portfolio scheduling for a big company here. Did that for 6 years, went on maternity leave, had my daughter, came back from that, did a little bit of work for myself and ended up back in events, helping to write the bid for the Cricket World Cup. Did that, ended up picking up a few event-related contracts, decided to work for myself in that space for a while, got another tap on the shoulder, asked to come and do a 3-month job helping with the redevelopment of Adelaide Oval. Did that. That ended up turning into a 6-year career at Adelaide Oval, manager of major events, running all of the non-cricket, non-football content there. So all the big concerts and things like the Liverpool Football Club coming over here and all sorts of fascinating and amazing events that we delivered there. Then I had the opportunity to move across to a company called Journey Beyond as their group manager of experience development, which was looking at all of their experiential tourism products across Australia and helping to premiumise them and creating new premium products as well. So I did that for 2 years. In the middle of that, COVID hit. And so don't really need to go into the detail of that in terms of, I'm sure everybody can understand, being in COVID, being in a travel and tourism industry, we were decimated. I was stood down, stood back up, told I wasn't going anywhere, made redundant, asked to stay on, had a new job offered to me, took that job on, did that for a few months. And in April 2021, I had this huge epiphany where I realised I was absolutely not loving what I was doing. I was at total burnout. And I had this wake-up call moment where I realised that at the age of 43, I still had not decided what I wanted to do with my life. And it frightened the shit out of me. And I knew a very close friend of mine had passed away several years before. And I had this absolutely overwhelming knowing sense that I knew there was something that I needed to do. I had no idea what it was. And even though I'd had all of these incredible roles throughout my life, which I knew people would consider absolute dream roles, I realised they were other people's dreams, not mine. And I hadn't had the courage to figure out what mine were. And I didn't want to die wondering. So I decided in April 2021 to step away. And it probably seemed in so many ways the most ridiculous thing to do in terms of COVID was still happening. There was so much uncertainty. But I went with the courage of that decision and terrifyingly / courageously walked away to nothing with the absolute certainty that I would give myself up to 6 months to figure out from a blank canvas what it was going to be for me. And that, I would take that time out because I simply refused to go any further, knowing that if I didn't do it now, I felt very strongly that I wouldn't do it down the track, that I would just keep going in, go to the next role, and never have that moment of having the courage to figure it out. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey that I could never have scripted and I wouldn't change a minute of.
You touch on something there about, these sorts of careers that pop up for so many of us that are identity forming in so many ways. These sorts of careers that are very cool, very interesting, go to any kind of party or social circumstance and say, I work on the tour down under, or I work on clips, or I work for Adelaide Oval events. And, it's a very comfortable place because you feel quite good about yourself saying those things. And I think it happens for a lot of us that, we get then stuck in that cycle. And exactly as you described, it's the kind of job that so many people would want, or that so many people would look at and go, wow. And you kind of think there's some sort of disconnect happening for me. And there are so many different ways that can trigger you to say, hang on, this doesn't feel quite right. And being able to even identify that as something that you can take action on is such a big journey in and of itself. But throwing yourself then into nothing is pretty intense. I feel like quite a kindred spirit there with you on that. And I think as somebody who's probably high achieved, you probably wanted to high achieve then in what came next. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Exactly, I will. But you've just brought up something that's really pivotal and incredibly important to this, because the identity part was huge. And I realised, even though I'm someone who I think anybody who knows me would say I am no ego, no arrogance. In fact, I hate the thought of anyone ever thinking that I was egotistical, arrogant, blowing smoke up my own ass. I just can't stand that. So even though I didn't, stomp around, I'm so, and I've got these great jobs, never, ever. But I knew that, and I realised very quickly that I had attached my identity to these roles. So one of the most terrifying things for me was sitting back with myself and saying, from a corporate perspective, in the role I was doing at Journey Beyond, in the capacity that I was at, the money I was on, the travelling around Australia, I knew that for me, I felt, wow, like this is probably as high as I'll get, because I had no aspirations to be an executive manager or a CEO or anything like that. But I also had this really terrifying sense of, if I stop doing this, if I step away from these corporate roles and everything that I've ever been known to be doing, what does it mean? Who am I? Will I lose friends? Will people stop liking me because I'm not those things anymore? And it really frightened me. But I also knew that was so not who I am as a person that I absolutely had to do that and see. And I will never forget after I resigned and I'd stepped away and I went on this, we're doing a little family holiday up north, and we got to this salt lake. And I ran out onto this salt lake and I was standing out there and I had this overwhelming sense of total and utter freedom and this sense of, I know exactly who I am and I couldn't be happier. And it was such a freeing, just an incredible moment of realizing that you don't need that. It's totally unnecessary. And it never was part of who I am at my core. So it surprised me that I'd let it get to that point where I don't think other people would have recognized it in me, but it was a big part of me. So thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's a really interesting thing. And I work with a lot of people with that, where you really adapt your identity to be around your role, and how scary that can be when you look at whether you make the change or the change is made for you, particularly if you're made redundant or anything like that, it can be really terrifying.
Yeah, I can completely relate. And I think for so many of us who go through this journey, we do put ourselves at risk then of over identifying with whatever comes next as well. You start to get your business structured, you start to put your feet in the business shoes and be like, yeah, okay, I know what I'm going to build now. Let's just see how this goes. Let's roll with this for a bit. And then all of a sudden you start making it your identity again. And you're like, oh, this has to fit perfectly. And pivoting then feels scarier because it's kind of all on you. And, I guess that kind of takes me to you getting to the phase where mentoring even becomes a consideration for you. So the Lesley who's hanging out in the salt, like running around, feeling all the feels. And, it's just kind of like in that 6-month period thinking about, all right, I'm going to really think about what I'm going to do next and what my next X period is going to look like. How and when did mentoring come up for you?
Interestingly, it came up quite late in the piece. I gave myself that 6-month deadline because I knew it could be a slippery slope. If you didn't put a deadline on it, you could be here in 3 years' time going, what am I doing? That clearly life wouldn't let that happen, finances, et cetera, et cetera. But to me, I needed to hold on to that 6-month deadline. But when I say I went blank canvas, I literally went, this could go anywhere. I actually assumed that my future would still be around events because that's what I've always done, some way, shape, or form. But for me, it was stripping it right back and looking at everything and going, right, what do I actually really love doing? How have I enjoyed being and showing up in life, in work, in my roles that I've had? While the roles themselves didn't excite me, what was it that I got so much out of? And I just started writing, and I wrote a lot of lists. I actually pulled them out earlier in preparation for this. I was just going back through that process thinking, what did I do? And I've just got a whole bunch of different random notebooks that I would, grab and just start jotting things down. And I wrote a work wish list, for example, of what exactly I would want my working scenario to look like. And again, at that point, I didn't know it was going to be mentoring. It could have been anything. It really could have been so many things. Interestingly, my very first business plan and idea was actually along your lines. I wanted to do a podcast because I felt like I had things I needed to get out of me that I wanted to share with other people. And so I wrote this whole business plan around podcasting, but I knew not a single thing about podcasting. That didn't stop me so much as then getting to this point of going, but I feel like I've got this stuff that I need to share and that is of value to people. And that's great. I can communicate that through a podcast because I'm a big communicator. I love writing. I love talking. But I realized that the most important thing for me was connecting with people. So that really genuine connection and, being eye to eye with someone and just having those light bulb moments and, really forming genuine, authentic, inspiring, motivating, deep and meaningful connection with people. So I went, okay, it's not going to be podcasting. What the hell's next? Like, what else would it look like? And for me, I was very adamant that I needed whatever it was to be of me where I am now. So using all of my professional experience, all of my life experience, not going back and studying something else to be taught by someone else how to do something. I felt very strongly that it needed to be of me where I'm at now. And that was a really challenging point because I thought, well, what else is there out there? Like, I don't want to go and study to be a psychologist. I'd done psych at uni. I didn't want to go back and study a degree. I didn't want to study to become a counselor. I didn't want to study to become a life coach. I didn't want to study. And it wasn't about the studying. It was never about that. It was just this sense that it needed to be of me, from me, putting out there in my way. And as I said, it was quite late in the piece where I can't even remember exactly how it happened, but I guess I was searching terms, what would I call myself if I was going to be helping people in a one-on-one situation? But I'm not a counselor, a therapist, a psychologist, a life coach. I'm none of these things. What would I call myself? And that's when I stumbled across a definition for mentoring. And I remember reading it and going, oh my God, literally using your personal professional life experience to help other people. In reality, I'm probably a mixture of coach, mentor, all of those things, but I don't come from this as an industry. I'm not part of an industry. I'm not part of an association. As I said, I haven't studied. I'm not attached to other professionals doing this thing or these things. So for me, it was mentor was the word and the term that matched me. And that's what I've put out there.
I think about this a lot because, right now I'm on a search for finding a wonderful psychologist, and I'm always on the search for finding the right kind of people, regardless of kind of what the title is that's attached to it, whether it's coach, mentor, psychologist, but finding the right person and finding the information that tells somebody why you might be the right person for them. I feel like that's a really big challenge in your industry and in all the surrounding industries around you. So once you got into that place of, okay, I'm going to make this an offering and I'm going to put it out there, what was your journey like trying to explain to people why you will be so great for them in this space? Because it feels very innately personal too. I'm really good at this. Just come with this journey.
Yeah, that's a really hot spot, raw one for me. But I'll tell you exactly how. So interestingly, the moment I put it out there that this is what I was going to do, the feedback from everybody I knew was, oh my God, this is perfect. This is you. This is what you need to bring to the world. And that's been consistent. It's been whether it's people that I hadn't seen for 20 years to people that I just finished working with. As soon as I would say to them, I'm starting this business, little shove, I'm mentoring, that is exactly what you were put here to do. So hearing that from other people was like, wow, okay, there's something they see in me that is aligning with this sense that this is what I need to do. And I was very clear from the get-go that I wanted it to be all based on word of mouth. Exactly what you just said, that reason of going, and as I said earlier, I'm not ego-driven. And it's really hard. I really admire people that have got that real salesy business development ability to be able to come in and pitch something and do it so well that you just captivate it and, you want to have whatever it is that they're offering. I find I really struggle in what would be called, your textbook salesy kind of approach. So for me, it's all about just be me. And if people resonate with that, then fantastic. There's a strong chance they might like to look further into what I'm doing and what I'm offering because, as I said, with the way that Paula described me, my best friend earlier, authentic. I am as real as it gets. I don't present differently to different people. I am me through and through. And that's actually been one of the most liberating things about this whole process is I'm not representing anybody's brand anymore. I'm not stepping into a different look, a different outfit, a different way of being, presenting, etc. I am entirely me, whether I'm now working in corporate, business or private. And that is just so liberating. So predominantly it's word of mouth, people that have known me, have worked with me, friends or family. And then it's the word of mouth from clients, then passing on the word and letting other people know. The challenge with that is obviously it's a slower process. And this is something that I consider relatively niche. So it's not like everybody's going out looking for a mentor or a / coach. Everybody goes out looking for a hairdresser and everybody goes out looking for an accountant or a tax agent or, a whole bunch of professions that almost everybody taps into in some way, shape or form. With what I'm doing, it is a relatively niche thing. And it takes time to find the people that are looking for that service and to be able to create that match. I wish it was a lot faster. I feel like I'm a horse champing at the bit, just, wanting that growth because it is without question the most fulfilling work I've ever done in my entire life. And as wanky as it sounds, it genuinely feels like what I was put here to do. And when I see the value that it's giving to clients, whether they're private, corporate or business, I can't even begin to tell you how fulfilling it is. I most often walk out and I'm in tears of gratitude, just so deeply fulfilled and so enriched by knowing that what I'm doing that does not feel like work to me at all is so appreciated and needed and valued by the people that are choosing it.
And it's really refreshing to hear. And I think it takes a lot of discipline to have patience and to have trust and to just give it time to get yourself out there. I can completely resonate with that sensation of this is the right path. I need to keep following this and delivering value. And that's the thing that keeps me going. Like when I get messages or Lesley, you've emailed me before, if I get a review or anything like that about how this podcast is providing value, I lose my shit completely in no uncertain terms. There's tears. And because it feels, you're like, wow, actually providing value. And it does feel very different to anything that's been done before. And it is a little bit of a push that you need when those days feel long and the months feel long and it's frustrating and you can't forecast anything and you don't know where it's heading and where it's going, but you just keep walking and you just keep moving. I can completely relate to that. I think it's a really valid feeling to have. And look, all the marketing courses, knowledge in the world can't take away from the fact if you've got a really good service and someone tells someone else about it, it's your best chance for conversion. So I totally get that. What's really interesting about your kind of incredible offering and the value that it brings as well, that I find, is the challenge then to figure out, particularly when you really enjoy it, but how to price yourself and how to value yourself economically and present it to others. How is that for you?
Without question, one of the hardest things I've found with the business. And even literally this week, it's hot topic for me. So I've made a decision to have a price increase as of the 1st of September. And this is the first time where I've been sure that it's the right decision. Whereas in the past, it's just this, oh my God. And even now, intellectually, I'm sure it's the right decision. But the emotional part of it going, oh God, I've got to communicate this to my clients and tell them the price is going up. And oh my God, what if they then stop, booking? And, what if I lose people? What if I'm outpricing myself? What if, all the questions. But I guess I have got a bit more knowledge now and I am hearing more about what other people are charging and also the reality of the price of living. And part of, I guess, the point of difference of what the way I do, if we're just talking the one-on-one mentoring sessions, for example, is that I operate remotely. So I go to people. I live on the hillside of Adelaide, but I'll go to the beach. If someone's down by the beach, I go and I meet them down there. The mentoring and moving part of it is that I take people out walking. So we go for a nice walk somewhere. I might have to pay for car parking, you're paying for petrol, you're doing all this other stuff. And it's just that value of the time as well. It's hard to put a dollar figure on your time, but when you then relate it to what else you could be doing with that time, how else you could be earning. For example, I'm also doing the team workshops. And of course, you can charge a lot more for a team workshop than you can for one-on-one mentoring. I also have a different fee for private clients versus business and corporate. I try to keep it more affordable for people that are paying out of their pocket, whereas with corporate, you can charge that little bit more because they have the budget for personal professional development and supporting for their staff. It is a massive challenge. However, a really interesting thing I've learned is that when you undercharge, people also undervalue. And if you're seen as being too cheap, people just think, well, she can't be that good or they can't be that good, because if they're only charging that much, it's a bit like you get what you pay for. So it is really challenging. And I guess at the end of the day, you only know if you're getting it right if people are still booking.
Prestige pricing is a real thing. And the value that's placed on something when it's got a higher price tag in terms of even how you feel when you purchase it. You feel like, wow, yes, there's a lot of psychology behind prestige pricing. It, as business people as well, it is something to consider because it also, in your line of work, certainly with a service-based industry, when you pay for something a little bit more premium in that one-on-one aspect, I feel like you even show up better. You value the session and you get the most out of it and you don't cancel, and it becomes more important.
Because you're investing, you're genuinely investing. And likewise, I invest so much into every session with every person. And as someone said to me recently, how do you put a value on 23 years plus of all of that experience professionally and personally that you're drawing on to help someone in a situation where they're seeking that support, guidance, direction, etc.? And it's a really interesting question. How do you put a value on that? But I'm also realistic. I don't want to be that person who's charging what I would call really ridiculous money. It's somehow finding that balance in between. But the other really interesting thing that I've found about it is, as I said before, I'm not a part of an association. I haven't come to this from industry. I've come from this from a very different perspective and background, and I'm creating it of me from me. And so I found it really hard to find information on what other people in the similar sort of roles were charging. And when I have done a bit of research, I found that a lot of them, if you look, for example, life coaches, etc., which I guess is the same sort of industry, they don't actually tell you. So it's one of those things where you've got to apply for information. And, I think, well, if I'm going to a psychologist, I'm going to a counsellor, I'm going to anything like that, a hairdresser, whatever, you want to be able to go on their website and look and see what the fees are so you know what you're up for, so you can make a decision. And now this could probably just a really personal thing, but I find that if I go on looking for a service and someone doesn't tell me what I'm going to be charged, I make the assumption that what they're about to charge is going to be really high. So I wouldn't even go any further. Whereas I figure if I at least am transparent, I put the pricing there, people know what they're up for. They can make a decision. They don't have to go through that awkwardness of having the conversation, thinking, oh, no, actually, that's a bit more than I can afford. I know I'm not a great salesperson. I'm not going to try and talk you into it. Here's what the pricing is. If it works for you, it'll work for me. Let's do it. That's been interesting. I do wonder of the mentality of that, whether it's a bit of a smoke and mirrors thing, whether they're just awesomely great salespeople, which they probably are. But yeah, for me, I just rather be transparent with it. And then if people make that choice, they make that choice. And hopefully they do.
Look, I think, you can't go on a social media network these days and not be told all of the 5 strategies to landing your dream clients. And if you price yourself like this is how this is going to happen, like, honestly, I watch them all and save them and think that I'm going to learn something about it. But so there's that side of it as well. But there's just so much advice out there for how you're meant to do things and why you're meant to be doing things. But all that advice aside, if you just think about the user experience and even just imagine putting yourself in this person's shoes, like exactly the same. If I go somewhere and I'm really interested in learning something from somebody, if I don't see a price, same thing, I automatically assume it's out of my price range. And now that might be a purposeful decision by that person because they are in fact out of my price range and they are only looking for people who do not look at the money aspect. And that's their way of being able to, perhaps weed out any sort of time wasting, circumstance for their side. I understand the psychology behind it and the why, but there is nothing better than going to a website, seeing some fantastic information and going, okay, that's how much that is priced at. All right, how now do I feel about it comfortably? And look, the only other thing I'd say that I feel like innately is something I think we should do as business owners is whenever you're going and picking a price for your time and you do the calcs and you work up, if I was getting paid to do this by a corporate organization or, and then superannuation and tax and all that other stuff you've got to consider, please add more on top. Add another 10 or 20% on top, because I have not met a human in business yet who hasn't inadvertently undervalued themselves in some way.
Oh, look, so I've only been in this business for 18 months. And when I look back at what I was charging when I first started, I actually now feel a little bit embarrassed because it's, oh God, you're really undercharging. But at the same time, for me, it's a journey and it's been a growth process. And I needed to do that to also build my own confidence and to get that validation that this is actually working, because I was starting something from scratch that I had no idea if it was going to work or not. So I didn't want to go out charging like a wounded bull and shooting yourself in the foot. So for me, it was like give. So I'll give the reduced pricing. I get that. And you will, and the clients will, without even realizing it, give me that feedback in terms of, is it working? Isn't it working? How can I improve it? So it's been a really incredible growing process through all of that.
Now, absolutely nothing wrong as well with putting your service offering out there, getting a few people to test and help you learn, for free if it fits you sometimes, just to cut your teeth on it or to, cut it short, just, lower than you'd like to, just to get a feel for it. There's nothing wrong and we can always build. I'd love to pop in the head of Lesley, who was sitting across from her first paying client that had come out of nowhere, that you'd met, that you'd had to make a rapport with. What was that experience like?
So really interestingly, the first client was someone who I didn't know at all, and I still don't know actually how she found me. She said she found me through Facebook. I think she must have been a friend of a friend who had seen my post. So that was so it wasn't what I was expecting at all. The second thing I wasn't expecting about it was that even though she was based in Adelaide, she wanted her session to be over the phone. So I thought, wow, okay, 2 things that are really odd here. I don't know where this person found me and I don't know how she found me, and she wants to do it in a manner which is totally opposite to what I wanted to do, which was taking the clients out walking. So talk about throwing a few test things, straight in there. So I've actually never met her, but we did the session over the phone and instantly it just felt right. And it worked so well that I now have a couple of clients that are interstate and some clients that are here where they opt to just do the phone call, and it works just as fine. But yeah, I can honestly say, hand on heart, that from the very first moment, it just felt incredibly right. It flowed. And I often talk about that, this sense of flow, that when I'm in a session with someone, whether it's in a one-on-one or it's in a workshop, something happens. It almost feels like something comes through me, and it's just this absolute flow. So I was very pleasantly surprised and delighted that the very first client just felt entirely normal. I remember hanging up the call and just being almost overwhelmed with tears, just thinking, holy shit, that just happened. And it felt incredible. And her feedback was instant. And she was incredibly grateful and loved it. It was really moving, actually, really moving. But that's quite normal for me. I think after almost every session, I'm really moved. I sometimes think I get just as much out of it as the clients do.
Couldn't agree more. It's me in this podcast. Every time I chat to someone, I feel like it's my therapy session, all the way through. So I get it. I totally get it. Mentoring and a mentoring offering, whether it's in a team format or a one-on-one, it all feels like a very deeply personal experience in terms of personal growth. And I think that's a little bit of what you just described there, how it kind of helps you get closer to you. What have been some of the personal challenges you've experienced in bringing this to the world and scaling your offering of bringing it to the world?
So in the first year, a big part of it was getting out of my own way and getting out of my own head and being really stuck in, I think my experience of going into small business, as I said, it's my first time I've ever done it. And it's very connected to who I am. It's not like I'm creating a product that I'm putting out there that you can like, hate, or otherwise. It is an offering of me. It was very confronting, and I think it almost amplifies any negativity in your mindset or your personality whatsoever. So it just felt like I was under the hot lamp of my own criticism and interrogation. And I would often find, particularly in that first year, by God, like just the highs and the lows of the roller coaster ride of it, and a lot of doubt, a lot of second guessing, imposter, really doubting yourself, undervaluing yourself. That was hard. That was really hard. And a big change was coming from a corporate world where you knew what you had to do, who you had to do it for, and how to do it. And you had years of experience and expectation. And even if it was in a different setting, there are things that are just standard from place to place. Starting out with business, everything's new, everything feels difficult, everything feels, these huge mountains you've got to climb over. Realizing that you don't have the answers, realizing that you do need to, and it's okay to reach out to other people for help and support is not only important, it's absolutely necessary. We cannot know it all, and we need to accept that so that we can get on with doing what we are there to do and not get bogged down in these things that we're trying to do, but they're not our strength. So getting out of the way of myself was a really big challenge, particularly in the first year. And I still have moments where I know that I'm blocking myself in so many ways. And it's just get yourself out the way and let this thing happen and let it grow and let it go and let it be what it needs to be. Yeah, the doubt part was huge. The valuing part was huge. On the flip side, it's also been one of the most amazing experiences in terms of getting to really understand who you are. And it's no surprise or secret that what I'm doing with clients is basically replicating the journey that I went through myself and all the things that were happening to me at that time, hitting my mid-40s and going, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. I don't feel like I've ever had a real passion in my life. I don't know what my purpose is. All of those things. I went through that whole journey myself, and I listened to podcasts. I did a lot of reading. I did some online courses. I did all of this stuff that I kind of sought out and found the answers to myself through a long, drawn out, I was going to say unsupported process. What I mean by that is I wasn't working with someone like me. I wish I'd had someone like me to go back and do that process with. But by doing that's how I then developed the skill set that I now have that I can help other people through it. And then drawing on that, a lot of the professional experience. One thing I've learnt is that we all underestimate the value of the experience that we have in our lives. And I have so much experience in so many ways, being able to tap into that without even realizing how valuable that is to someone else, and being able to draw things that they can then see and connect with and have big aha moments and help them to move forward is just invaluable.
Oh, I love so much about that. I almost, my head was wobbling around the aspect of just how bloody hard everything is. It's something I struggle to articulate in the most impactful sense, but do try to talk about it quite a bit, which is just the difference in the day-to-day between running a business and working in a role, and just the most ridiculous things that slow you down. The things I Google, the things I don't know, the things I spend 4 hours on just to get nowhere and feel like an idiot at the end of the day. That stuff is so hard. And yes, I hear you 100% on that.
I'd love to share this little snippet to anyone who is yet to get into business, who might be listening to your podcast as I was, still in that process of thinking about and wanting to create a business. And the things that were the very early potential stumbling blocks for me that felt like insurmountable mountains were things like insurance, legalities, risk, all this stuff. I just felt like it was too much. Like, how do you do all that? It must cost a fortune. I was so scared and very nearly put off by what I would call the legals, the financial side of it. And it wasn't until I went, you just need to ask around. So let's get facts. What do I actually need? How do I figure that out? Well, I need to find the right people. So ask people that you trust. So friends of mine had their own business. Who did you use? Oh, we use this insurance broker. Who did you use for this? Who did you use for that? Get on the phone, make contact with those people. They're the ones that make sense of it all for you and make your life easier. But I think there's this thing, and I think particularly with women, where we feel like we have to do it all, we have to know it all, we have to figure it all out ourselves. Being able to acknowledge that and go, actually, that scares the shit out of me, but I don't want it to stop me. Get the facts, make the phone calls. You can be so overwhelmed with information, but just start talking to people. And I'm going to underline the word talking to people, because there is so much information online that it can be completely overwhelming. And something you said before about courses, and, there is, you can see all this stuff online where they're telling you the top 5 and top 10 things you must be doing. One thing I did do early on, because I was coming at this so green. I don't even really use social media much for, personally. I've never been big with it. I only use it with my friends and family, very private. I've just never been a big social media person, and suddenly going, oh shit, I'm going to have social media accounts and do all this stuff. So what did I do? I started doing all these courses, and there's some really great stuff out there that's free, which of course, when you're starting up business and you're coming at it with no finance, it was all about what can I get? What is the best information I can get for free? And I found some really great resources out there. So I started doing all of these online courses. Do you know what it did? It made it worse for me in so many ways, because it kept reinforcing what I didn't know. And it was really overwhelming. And yes, I took some great, really great, useful bits of information. But for me, now everybody's journey is different. I got to the point where I realized I needed to stop doing that, because all I was doing was reinforcing all of this stuff that I didn't know. And I went back to what works for me. And I realized that my approach to everything is it's got to be from me, of me. So why am I trying to follow these cookie cutter approaches to all these other things when that's not how I operate any part of who I am? So yes, it's great to get information, but be really clear on what works for you and adapt it to you accordingly, because otherwise it is a minefield. Not only can you waste, or should I say spend, a lot of money doing stuff that do you really need? Maybe you don't. But it can take you away from doing what you really need to do and what you want to be doing in your business.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I tend to do really abstract courses when I hit a junction in my business. Sounds like you did some practical works. I will do really abstract shit.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'll get overwhelmed with my next step. And so I'll decide to do a styling course.
But hey, you never know where styling might come in help. And particularly, when you're interviewing people, you might, I've just got this great tip that I learned with this styling course I was doing.
I always do that. I think, if I have this skill, this will add to this. That was quite a while ago when I was doing ceramics and pieces like that. So it felt very relevant to what I was doing at the time. But I agree with you that sometimes it can be a distraction because you're scared of what you're producing, and you think you need to know more than you know to be able to do anything. But the information comes from the do. It's the action. And you do have to find your teachers. Now that I've been on this journey for quite some time, I can really easily identify the people I want to learn from. And I think that's been a really big part of it. As you network and as you meet people and as you get a vibe, you can absolutely find if there's anything you need to learn, the people. I found, and what you said before about asking people for contacts or asking people for who did you use? How do you do this? How did you do that? Absolutely invaluable. I found my accountant through a previous guest. I found the incredible woman who did our Unemployed and Afraid logo and branding. Shout out Benita Edwards. She is a superstar that dealt with my very frustrating briefing and very specific needs through that process. But I found her through Ben Willis, who was a previous guest. You do just start to find these people and you start to bring it, but it takes time. But yeah, if you spend nothing but time doing courses before you do anything, you will get nothing done. And I have definitely been there. The big thing you touch on there as well is, it is a discovery phase. I think listening to so much of your story and the process that you've gone through to get to this place where you do feel really confident about, what you're offering and where it can grow to. A lot of us look at that output and that outcome and hear about how fulfilling it is and how, value enhancing it is and think, oh gosh, I'm so far from that. It just doesn't feel right. And, I just think it's important to note that. And as I can hear in your story, it is a discovery. And sometimes you make a decision to follow a business path and you find the one thing or the kind of the core that you can leverage a few things off of. And you get really clear on that. This is kind of what I'm meant to do. And other times you find the thing that you're meant to do. And then 6 months later, you realize, actually, no, that's not it. But it got me closer to the thing that I need to. And I think that's just a really important takeaway for anyone is that when you go on these discovery paths and you're looking for the thing that you're meant to do, not only is it very likely to be a number of different things, it's very likely that it could take a really long time to find it. And, you'll change your mind along the way. Does that, I guess, quantify a bit of your experience, how you've been going through this?
I don't think I could actually say a bigger yes. If you could see me, I am just nodding and nodding here because I've been thinking about this so much. When I set out, it was all about one-on-one mentoring. The ironic thing is that the very first phone call I got, apart from the lady, like my actual first client, the first phone call I got was actually from Adelaide Oval, and they said, oh, we've seen you've gone out with your business. We've had a look at the website. We love what you're doing. Now, keep in mind, the whole website was all about one-on-one mentoring. And this former colleague of mine says, can you come in and do motivational workshops for my team? And I went, where did that come? I'm thinking to myself, where did that come from? And in the same breath, I went, of course I can. Sure. I'll figure out how the hell I'm going to do that later. But yes, of course I can. So I went in and did that with them. And that was amazing because I literally had to just create content that I thought would work, and very glad to say it did really well. It worked really well. But then I shelved it and I went, oh, no, I'm not here to do workshops. I'm here to do one-on-one mentoring. So I kept going down this path of the mentoring. And it wasn't until later in the year where I was approached by another couple of businesses and I went and did some more workshops for them. And I kept going, yeah, they're going really well. I really, really like doing the workshops. But I just felt that I was supposed to be here doing one-on-one mentoring. On the first anniversary of the business, so 1st of February this year, I had this really interesting, profound moment where I realised that not only had it taken me 12 months to get my head around the fact that this was now truly what I was doing, I also realised that it had taken other people that time for them to now realise that this is now what Lesley's doing. And for me, there was this really significant shift where I knew that for that first year, it was about me feeling my way through it, feeling my way into it, feeling my way through it, getting that feedback, getting all of that sort of stuff, and learning so much in the process. And then when I hit that first year anniversary, it was like, right, okay, this is happening. This is real. I am doing this. I absolutely love this. And it's time for it to grow. And I now believe in it. And, I'm seeing that it's happening. I'm seeing that it's working. Let's do this thing. And then I really started thinking about, as I said to you before, for me, it was so important to do something where I was connecting with people. So one-on-one is amazing. And you connect very closely and very strongly with these people. And you can have some really emotional moments together. But I realized that when I'm in a team workshop setting, I'm not only getting to work with one person, I'm getting to create that amazing connection and experience with a number of people in the same room. Not only do I get to connect, but I get to help them connect. So it's like amplifying on so many levels this experience of connection. So then I realized, why have I been shying away from this? And the wake-up call for me with that, or the learning for me from that, was, as I spoke about before, I had identified so much myself as being from the corporate world that when I walked away from that, I needed that first year to really put that gap between who I had been and who I was now. And for me, an important part of that was drawing that line and saying, I don't want to be corporate for a while. So while I was able to go back and I did a couple of team workshops, I wasn't conscious of this at the time, but now I can see it so clearly. That was all about me. I'm almost picturing like putting my feet back into the earth and recentering who I am and what I'm about, and not losing myself down that corporate identity hole or tunnel again. So that now I've had that year under my belt. I've done that. I know it works. I know there's demand there. And I'm so strongly now in who I am and what I'm doing that I can go back into the corporate world and do it without that sense of losing who I am again. And so now I see the value in it. I enjoy it so much. As I said, I get that amplified connection. And not only is it just one-on-one with someone, it's a room full of people, and you know that they're going to take that connection out of the room. So it's next level. It's like leveling up again. And so now the growth area of the business is in the team workshops. I love it so much, working with some amazing clients and just seeing that incredible evolution. At the same time, when I was going back from the original blank canvas scenario, going, well, what is it I'm going to do? What is it I want to do? And as I said to you, it could have been anything. Interestingly, for me, one of the top things I wrote on my list was public speaking. I have always enjoyed public speaking. I don't like reading from a script. I can, but I love speaking off the cuff. I love speaking from the heart. And I realized that, well, that's a thing in itself. So I say, and I put on my proposals that I put out to industry, etc., that I have 3 offerings. One is one-on-one mentoring, one is team workshops, and one is speaking engagements. And I haven't actually put that out there in terms of promoting that. I haven't actively gone out looking for that. But I know intuitively that there's this whole other element of it that will be about speaking and, speaking, motivational talks, etc. And I often think of you, Kim, and I think about the things that, that we learn through your podcast and the information that you yourself share as you're interviewing people. And I've really thought about that for me, as you just said, the process has been coming in with an idea of one thing and then following this absolutely fascinating journey while it's evolving with me there in the driver's seat, but also kind of in this vehicle that knows where it's going as well. And I'm kind of 1 minute I'm the driver and 1 minute I'm the passenger. And it's an incredible journey, and it feels like a privilege to be part of it. So yeah, I'm very aware that where I am now is probably not where I'll be in another year's time or 2 years' time. And it's great to have that ability to be really open to that and let it flow and see where it goes.
Yes to all of this, so many things. And it is 100% reciprocal in that. And I think this is the case of so many of these types of conversations when you do find people who are on a business building journey or, they're building something and you start to share your story. And that's so much what this podcast is about. It's reciprocal. So every time, I hear things, I learn something about myself in your story as well. You described having space between you and your corporate career. I remember walking away, a long career as a radio commercial strategist, and geez, I was good at it and I was passionate about it. It was my whole identity. And then it was like, I was like, I just have to do anything other than that. I don't, and then, came yoga, then came ceramics, then came bloody plant-based recipes, like all these abstract things and I didn't know where it was heading and into this now. And of course, this is an audio medium. I worked in an audio medium. Suddenly my voice is coming out in a different way. Suddenly all of that history, I stepped into a consulting space and, suddenly all that history is becoming very relevant and I feel very ready to embody it in a different way. So there's never anything wasted. There is always so much opportunity to be whoever you want to be in any kind of abstract sense that's different to that and to step into the new versions of you. And I love that you highlight speaking engagements. It is one of my things that's on my list as well. I just know that's something I want to do at some stage. And you just kind of put it out there and in some way, yep, cool, I'm just going to wait and see what comes next. And so much of this journey is about just setting yourself up to be ready for what's next and to rise to that challenge, not to be prepared for it by doing a public speaking course and how to structure a keynote course now. But when the time comes, we step up into those roles and that land. So I absolutely love that. Lesley, you are just an absolute shining light, and I can see why your clients absolutely love working with you. I'm not surprised, and I see nothing but incredible growth for you and your business in all of those aspects: personal, one-on-one, team, speaking, and probably the 3 or 4 other things that you haven't even thought of yet that some client is going to bring to you and you go, holy yes, I'm going to do that. That's absolutely it. But, sharing so much of yourself, it is such a gift. You know how I end this episode, which is we are here for community. We are here for pumping each other up. How can the listener and I support you on this next stage of your business experience?
Thank you, Kim. You can support me by continuing to do these amazing podcasts because you inspire and bring so much knowledge and, like you said, reciprocal. Every time I hear someone's story that you're interviewing, I'm nodding along, I'm learning something. And the more we learn about other people, the more we learn how similar we are, how we're all going through very similar things. They might be completely different shapes and formats, etc. But it's such a great way to feel connected and to understand that you're not alone out there. How can the listener help? If anything I've said resonates, if you are looking at starting out business or you're deep in business and you want to take the opportunity to step back and make sure, or to contemplate, what is my purpose? What is my direction? Like a reset, a check-in, and you'd like a mentor to help you with that? Absolutely. Please look me up. Let's have a phone call. If you are working still in corporate or an organisation or any team, if you're a business owner and you're looking for someone to come in and just help your team with a reset, reconnection, again, like you said in the intro, thank you, that was wonderful. Everything I do is all around who really are we? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Where are we heading? What are our values? All the important things, the real human element. And if we don't know why we're doing something, well, if you don't know your why, you're just kind of getting by. If anybody feels drawn to my services and would like to look them up, please look up my website. I would love to have more followers on Instagram. So yes, please come and follow along. And if you like what you've heard and you like what you read and you feel like you'd like to, then please spread the word and help me grow my little business, Little Shove. Thank you so much, Kim, because from even before I launched my business and I stumbled across your podcast, you have been a constant. And I'll never forget listening to that first episode that you dropped with your mum. Driving along, I was coming back from a holiday and I was driving along listening to it in the car and my neck nearly snapped from nodding along in agreement to all the things I was feeling and knowing and hearing someone else just speak what I was thinking and feeling. And it is such a lonely world. Deciding to go out in small business on your own as a sole operator, it really is a lonely world, particularly when it is something of you. So for you, it's of you from your podcast. For me, it's of me in terms of the way I'm delivering my business and this mentoring thing I'm doing. It's very of me and yours is very of you. So you don't have a team to fall back on. You surround yourself by people that are good supports, etc., in terms of service providers and friends, but no one else is in it except you. When I listen to your podcast, when I listen to other people talking from their own business experience, I find it's such a relief actually to hear what other people are saying. It's obviously very different experiences in terms of different businesses, different products, different services, etc. But just hearing other people battling with the same things, experiencing the same highs and lows, it's really nice to know you're not alone. It makes you feel like you're not your own little weirdo so much, just sitting there feeling like you're not coping at times. So a huge thank you to you for being a constant in the 18 plus months, if I take into consideration before launching, that you've been part of my journey. Thank you so much for inviting me to tell my story today. I feel like we could have talked forever. I wanted to also say to you that I appreciate so much how real, honest, authentic you are in the way that you come across, in the way that you connect with everybody. We live and breathe your own business journey alongside you. And I really appreciate that. I love the way that you've just created this space where we can all sit back and go, holy shit, no one's got it together. We're all trying to head in a direction and it really is a roller coaster. And it's a roller coaster on so many levels, personally and professionally. So thank you for what you've created. Thank you for what you bring to all of us. And thank you for the opportunity to be part of it.
Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the podcast for small business builders with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you love it, you can say thanks with a star rating and a review. And of course, join the community on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Find us at Unemployed and Afraid wherever you're hanging out, and I'll see you there.